Welcome back to the deep dive. This time we're taking you to a wine region you might not be familiar with, Campos de Cima da Serra in southern Brazil. Forget those sun-drenched plains you might be picturing. We're talking vineyards carved into canyons framed by waterfalls. Truly breathtaking stuff.
It is really something.
And the wines.
Oh, the wines.
Let's just say they're making the world take notice.
Absolutely.
So especially the sparkling wines and aromatic whites.
Yeah, it's really remarkable how this region has emerged as a producer of high-quality wines in such a short time. What we're seeing here is a convergence of factors. The cool climate, high-altitude volcanic soils, and innovative winemaking techniques, all coming together to create something truly special.
I'm already intrigued. But before we get into the specifics, I'm curious about how winemaking even got started in this seemingly unexpected corner of Brazil. We usually associate Brazilian wine with Serra Gaúcha, right?
That's right. Serra Gaúcha has a long history of winemaking, largely influenced by Italian immigrants. Campos de Cima da Serra, while also in southern Brazil, has a much shorter history, just a couple of decades. And while those Italian roots are definitely present, these winemakers are forging their own path.
But being a newcomer also presents challenges, doesn't it?
It does.
How are they establishing themselves in a market that's already dominated by more established regions?
Well, they're facing that challenge head on
Yeah.
by focusing on what makes them unique. The high altitude, the cool climate, and the expression of those characteristics in the wines. It's a story that's resonating with wine lovers who are looking for something different, something exciting.
I'm seeing a lot about that high altitude and the material you sent, averaging around 1,000 meters above sea level.
It's high up there.
I'm curious, how do those temperature swings actually translate into the flavor profile of the wines?
Well, the high altitude and the cool climate means slower grape ripening, leading to wines with naturally higher acidity and lower alcohol content. Think crisp, refreshing whites with vibrant fruit flavors, and elegant reds with a beautiful balance. It's a style that's very much in demand right now.
Okay, so we've got the climate and altitude working in their favor, but what about the soil? Does that play a role in the character of the wines as well?
Absolutely. The diverse soil types, including basalt clay and sand, contribute to the complexity of wines. It's like having a multifaceted canvas for the grapes to express themselves. You'll find wines with mineral notes, earthy undertones, and a real sense of place.
It sounds like a recipe for success. So let's talk about the grapes themselves. What are some of the standout varieties that are thriving in this unique terroir?
You'll find both white and red varieties doing well here. For the whites, Chardonnay is a star player, with some winemakers experimenting with oak aging, which adds a lovely richness and complexity to the wines.
I'm imagining those oak-aged Chardonnays would be fantastic with some of the local cuisine.
You're right on track. And then there's Sauvignon Blanc. The cool climate here really amplifies those herbaceous notes in the Sauvignon Blanc. You might get aromas of cut grass gooseberry or even a hint of jalapeno, which adds an extra layer of complexity.
Now that's a Sauvignon Blanc I'd love to try. What else are we looking at in terms of whites?
Riesling Italico is another one that's well suited to the cool climate. It's bursting with aromas of honeysuckle and orange blossom, with a crispness that makes your mouth water.
Riesling Italico.
Mm.
That's a new one for me. I'm adding it to my list. And what about the reds? Are the classic varieties like Cabernet Sauvignon and Merlot able to ripen fully in such a cool climate?
That's where the skill of the winemakers really comes in. They've had to adapt their techniques to work with the climate, and the results are impressive. Merlot generally does well in cooler regions, and you'll find some beautiful expressions here. But growing Cabernet Sauvignon at this altitude is a gamble. When it pays off, you get wines with incredibly concentrated flavors and a structure that can age for years.
That sounds like a wine worth cellaring. And then there's Pinot Noir, of course, a grape that loves a cool climate.
Yes.
What sets the Campos de Cima da Serra Pinot Noir apart?
They exhibit that classic elegance you expect from a cool climate Pinot, but with a unique twist. You'll find aromas of red cherry raspberry and subtle floral notes, but also a distinctive minerality and earthiness that reflects the terroir.
I can almost taste it now. But before we move on, we had to talk about the sparkling wines.
Of course.
The material mentions that Campos de Cima da Serra has excellent sparkling wine potential. What makes this region so well suited for bubbly?
The cool climate and high altitude create the ideal conditions for elegant, fresh, sparkling wines. Many winemakers here are using the traditional method, with the second fermentation happening in the bottle. Just like in champagne, it's a labor-intensive process, but it results in those fine, persistent bubbles and complex aromas we associate with high-quality sparkling wine.
Speaking of quality, I'm curious about the winemaking practices in Campos de Cima da Serra. Are they sticking to traditional methods or are they embracing more modern techniques?
It's a fascinating blend of both. You'll find winemakers who are deeply connected to the traditions of their ancestors, but they're also open to new ideas and technology. For example, they might use short pruning to protect the delicate buds from winter frost, a technique that's been passed down through generations. But they're also using modern technology like precision viticulture to monitor the vineyards and make data-driven decisions.
So it's like they're combining the best of both worlds, old world knowledge and new world innovation.
Precisely. And that's what makes Campos de Cima da Serra so exciting. They're not afraid to experiment, to push boundaries, and to create something truly unique.
I'm starting to get a real sense of that pioneering spirit. So let's talk about the wines themselves. What are some specific bottles or producers that you think our listeners should be on the lookout for?
There are a few standouts that come to mind. Ericurie Vigneaus de Altitude is known for its excellent Pinot Noir and Chardonnay, really showcasing the potential of those grapes in this cool climate.
I've heard good things about their Pinot. What else is on your list?
Vinicolo Guatambu is another one to watch. They're producing a Chardonnay sur lie, which means the wine is aged on its lees, the dead yeast cells left over after fermentation. This adds a richer texture and complexity with nutty and brioche-like flavors. And they're also making a sparkling Pinot Noir, which sounds incredibly intriguing.
Now that's a combination I wouldn't have expected. Are there any other producers that are pushing the boundaries of what's possible in Campos de Cima da Serra?
Vinícola Alma Lusitana is doing something really interesting by focusing on Portuguese grape varieties, like the Syria grape.
Portuguese grapes in Brazil. I'm definitely intrigued. It sounds like this region is full of surprises.
It certainly is, and that's just the beginning. Beyond the wines themselves, there's a whole world of enotourism waiting to be discovered in Campos de Cima da Serra.
All right, you've piqued my curiosity. Tell me more about what awaits visitors to this region.
Picture this. You're hiking through breathtaking canyons, marveling at cascading waterfalls, and then you stumble upon a small family-run winery nestled amidst rolling hills. You're greeted with warm hospitality, offered a taste of their latest vintage, and invited to share a meal with the winemakers themselves. That's the kind of experience you can have in Campos de Cima da Serra.
I'm getting serious under the Tuscan sun vibes here, but with the Brazilian twist.
Exactly. It's about slowing down, savoring the moment, and connecting with the people and the place.
And you mentioned the gaucho culture earlier. That's something that really piqued my interest. What role does that play in shaping the identity of this region?
It's an integral part of the fabric of Campos de Cima da Serra. The gauchos are known for their rugged independence, their connection to the land, and their love of horses. You'll see that spirit reflected in everything from the local cuisine, like the traditional churrasco barbecue, to the music and dance.
So it's more than just a wine region. It's a cultural immersion.
Precisely. It's about experiencing a way of life that's deeply rooted in tradition, and that's something truly special.
All right, we've talked about the Italian heritage, the gaucho culture, the breathtaking scenery, and of course the incredible wines. What's the overall impression you're getting from these sources? Is this region just a flash in the pan? Or do you think it has the potential to become a major player in the wine world?
I'm definitely sensing that this is more than just a passing trend. There's a real sense of momentum building here, a combination of passion, innovation, and a deep respect for the terroir.
But they're still facing those challenges we talked about earlier, right? The high production costs, the need to establish distinct identity, and so on.
Yeah, those challenges are real. But what's encouraging is that the winemakers here are aware of these challenges, and they're actively working to overcome them. They're forming cooperatives, investing in research, and promoting the region both domestically and internationally.
So it's a collective effort.
Exactly. It's not just about individual wineries succeeding. It's about building a strong regional brand, a brand that represents quality, sustainability, and a unique sense of place.
And they're also dealing with the ever-present challenge of climate change, which is impacting wine regions all over the world.
That's true.
How is Campos de Cima da Serra positioned to face this global issue?
Well, you'll find that many winemakers here are descendants of those early Italian immigrants, and they've carried on some of those traditions, like using specific pruning techniques or focusing on family-run estates. It gives the wines a real sense of history and heritage.
So it's like a blend of old world heritage and new world innovation.
I'm curious, did these Italian immigrants bring specific winemaking traditions or grape varieties with them to Campos de Cima da Serra? While the sources don't go into detail about specific traditions, it's likely they brought knowledge of viticulture and winemaking, passed down through generations. It's worth noting that the Italian influence on Brazilian wine is significant. Many of the early winemakers in Serra Gaucha were Italian immigrants who brought their expertise and passion for wine to their new home.
It seems like a natural progression then,
Wow.
for those traditions to find their way to Campos de Cima da Serra.
Yes, and what's fascinating is how these traditions are now being adapted to this unique terroir. The Italian immigrants brought with them a deep respect for the land and a commitment to quality, values that are clearly evident in the wines being produced in Campos de Cima da Serra today.
It sounds like those values are at the heart of what they're doing here.
Absolutely. And you can see that reflected in the wines themselves. There's a sense of balance, of elegance, of letting the grapes speak for themselves. It's a style that's both refined and approachable.
It's making me want to book a flight and experience it firsthand. Speaking of which, the sources you sent paint a really vivid picture of this region as an emerging wine tourism destination.
Yes. It's clear that Campos de Cima da Serra is about more than just the wine. It's about the whole experience. The stunning natural beauty, the opportunity to connect with nature, and the chance to immerse oneself in the local culture.
Okay, so what are we talking about here? Give me a sense of what I might experience if I were to visit.
Picture this. You're hiking through breathtaking canyons, marveling at cascading waterfalls. And then you stumble upon a small family-run winery nestled amidst rolling hills. You're greeted with warm hospitality, offered a taste of their latest vintage, and invited to share a meal with the winemakers themselves. That's the kind of experience you can have in Campos de Cima da Serra.
I'm getting serious under the Tuscan sun vibes here, but with a Brazilian twist.
Exactly. It's about slowing down, savoring the moment, and connecting with the people and the place.
And you mentioned the gaucho culture earlier. That's something that really piqued my interest.
Yeah.
What role does that play in shaping the identity of this region?
It's an integral part of the fabric of Campos de Cima da Serra. The gauchos are known for their rugged independence, their connection to the land, and their love of horses. You'll see that spirit reflected in everything from the local cuisine, like the traditional churrasco barbecue, to the music and dance.
So it's more than just a wine region. It's a cultural immersion.
Precisely. It's about experiencing a way of life that's deeply rooted in tradition. And that's something truly special.
Right, we've talked about the Italian heritage, the gaucho culture, the breathtaking scenery, and of course the incredible wines. What's the overall impression you're getting from these sources? Is this region just a flash in the pan, or do you think it has the potential to become a major player in the wine world?
I'm definitely sensing that this is more than just a passing trend. There's a real sense of momentum building here, a combination of passion, innovation, and a deep respect for the terroir.
But they're still facing those challenges we talked about earlier, right? The high production costs the need to establish a distinct identity and so on.
Yes, those challenges are real, but what's encouraging is that the winemakers here are aware of these challenges, and they're actively working to overcome them. They're forming cooperatives, investing in research, and promoting the region both domestically and internationally.
It's a collective effort.
Exactly. It's not just about individual wineries succeeding, it's about building a strong regional brand, a brand that represents quality, sustainability, and a unique sense of place.
And they're also dealing with the ever-present challenge of climate change, which is impacting wine regions all over the world.
That's true.
How is Campos de Cima da Serra positioned to face this global issue?
Well, it's true. But what's fascinating is that some of the very things that make Campos de Cima da Serra special might actually help them weather the storm, so to speak. That naturally cool climate and high altitude could be their secret weapon.
So while other regions are struggling with rising temperatures, Campos de Cima da Serra might be able to maintain those ideal growing conditions.
That's the thinking. As traditional wine regions grapple with hotter summers and unpredictable weather patterns, this region might just become a haven for grape varieties that prefer a cooler environment.
That's a pretty optimistic outlook. It almost sounds like they have a built-in advantage.
In a way, they do. And some experts even believe that Campos de Cima da Serra could become a refuge for grapes like Pinot Noir, which is notoriously finicky and thrives in cooler climates. As temperatures rise in Burgundy and other classic Pinot Noir regions, this region of Brazil might just become the perfect place to cultivate those delicate grapes.
That's an incredible thought, that this relatively young wine region could play a role in preserving some of the world's most beloved grape varieties. Are there any other ways that Campos de Cima da Serra might be shaping the future of wine?
Their willingness to experiment could be a major factor. They're not afraid to try new things, whether it's planting lesser-known Portuguese grapes or exploring innovative winemaking techniques. This openness to experimentation could lead to the development of new climate-resilient grape varieties or even entirely new wine styles.
So they're not just adapting to change, they're actively shaping it. That's pretty impressive for a region that's relatively new to the winemaking scene.
It is, and it really underscores the point that the world of wine is constantly evolving. We need to be open to new possibilities, new regions, and new ways of thinking about wine.
Well said. And for our listeners, this is just a taste of what Campos de Cima da Serra has to offer. There's a whole world of discovery waiting for you, from exploring the unique wines and wineries to immersing yourself in the stunning landscape and vibrant culture of this region.
Exactly. Don't be afraid to step outside your comfort zone and try something new. You might just discover your next favorite wine, and you'll definitely expand your horizons in the process.
And on that note, we encourage you to continue your own deep dive into the world of Campos de Cima da Serra. Seek out these wines, learn more about the region, and who knows, maybe one day you'll even find yourself hiking through those breathtaking canyons with a glass of Brazilian sparkling wine in hand. Cheers to new discoveries.